give the streaming. There we go. Fingers crossed this is going to work. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we've got 1 minute, and then I'll introduce the session. And 10 seconds. Bear with me. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the World Biogas Expo. You're viewing the Circular Cities stage, and we're through to our final session of the day. Unpacking the food waste challenge in the UK, looking at how digestible packaging could be a game changer. If you do have any questions, please type them in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side. What we'll do is we'll go through each of the presentations, and then at the very end, we'll pose the questions to the panel. If you're on the go, feel free to download the Swap Card app to your smartphone, and you can access all the regular content there just through the app tool. If you do have any technical issues, visit the Swap Card exhibitor booth, and a member of staff will be available during the event to assist you. Please do have a look around at the exhibitors, the products and services during this live session, so you'll be able to keep the screen up as you go through those. It's a really great way to sort of find people as they're talking and see some of the products that they're talking about. Yeah, do remember to personalise your agenda. We've still got another day tomorrow, so there's quite a lot of content that you can have a look at, and you'll just, if you register, you'll get a reminder just so you don't miss anything. So the live sessions won't be available to replay the day after, so just remember to upgrade to a full content package, but we'll email you any further details. So without further ado, we'll start the first session, which is Dr. John Williams, who is the Chief Technical Officer at Aquapack Polymers. So John, if you'd like to turn on your camera and your microphone, and then perfect.
Just get the presentation up. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be able to speak a little bit about Aquapack's technology in the aimed at the AD area. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So just a little bit of a brief introduction to Aquapack itself. We're a relatively new company. We specialise in a polymer called polyvinyl alcohol, which has been around for a long time, but not in this form. So we are specialists in thermally processing this material. It's the first in the world to be able to do that across a wide range of the available forms of polyvinyl alcohol. So it's a multifunctional material, and it's very useful in sort of packaging environments, particularly because of its barrier properties, its strength, and so forth. It's got exceptional barriers to things like oil, grease, fats, waxes, oxygen, things like that. You can heat seal it. It's got natural anti-static and natural resistance to UV. So it's an extremely versatile polymer, but it also happens to be a hydrophilic material, so a water-loving material, which promotes its biodegradation in various forms, including AD, which we'll cover shortly. And the basically principle behind this is, as you can see on the left-hand side there, the photograph, we produce the pellet material. So that can be used in any standard thermal processing equipment, from blown film, extrusion coating, injection molding, and all of the forms typically that plastics are used for, but gives you this ability to not only keep primary functionality, but also have options for end of life, depending on what sort of form you want it in. And we've done an awful lot of work in the area around its disposal and its safety with independent experts and laboratories in the field to confirm its behaviour in both closed captured waste environments and also into the open environment itself. So greenwashing is not what we do. So you look at this, it's inherently a non-toxic material. It's very well documented as the base polymer, which is non-toxic. And the way we formulate is we make sure that still remains the case. So our stabilizing additives, etc., in our formulations maintain that non-toxicity. And in fact, in many cases, direct food contact application applicability as well. We've done tests around marine safety. In fact, we're also running, because some of the marine standards are a little bit questionable in terms of their real life behavior. So we're actually running a 2-year program with Heriot-Watt University on looking at exactly the behavior of our material, and also one or two other plastic materials as well. So as I say, this opens it up to these multiple end-of-life options, including biodegradability, but also recyclability as well. So it's very much a circular economy material. We know the problem. I don't need to dwell on this. The problem with plastics generally in terms of their, unfortunately, environmental negatives. Clearly plastics are an exceptional material in terms of their performance, but we do need to now start thinking about what happens when they do, unfortunately, enter the environment in the way that we've seen. And therefore we need to change our dynamics here in terms of the materials that we're using and the combinations thereof. And that's where we come in, because hydropol can either be used on its own, or it can be used in combination with existing materials or some of the newer materials coming through, so some of the bioplastics. So you can maintain that primary functionality that everybody wishes to see, but also opens up the possibilities for better end-of-life solutions than perhaps currently available at the moment. Just to give you some end-of-life solutions here that we're working on, and this is nowhere near a comprehensive amount here, but you can see some of the applications is typical in these areas, and you can see obviously that primary functionality is coming through, but also that end of life. You'll see in that top left box there, so in fact where we started, which was monolayer films for bags. So through our converters, taking our pellet material into film processes and producing bags that went into specialty areas such as garment bags and anti-stack bags and other areas. But of course, you'll see there AD, which will obviously is the main thrust of this conversation. So what brought us to this point in digestible food waste bags? Well, unusually for a polymer, it will go through an anaerobic process and digest. So it is broken down by the microbes in an AD system, as well as in fact aerobically, so it will compost as well. So it's an unusual material in that sense in terms of its chemistry and the way it interacts with the different environments, either in an aerobic environment or in this case, of course, in an anaerobic environment. So we did some initial test work with standard AD tests to prove the efficacy of the material and how it performs and what gauge of materials will, for example, in film, will pass these tests and so forth, and how it just simply reacts in those environments. And that brought us to the possibility that we could start to potentially use this in terms of introduction to the market for a digestible bag for AD, because we knew that is one of the questions certainly the AD industry has been looking at for some time. And we started that process basically synthesizing the material, the right formulation that would give us a bag quality that would meet the criteria for handling and ultimately obviously for digestion. So we looked at things like sealability and robustness, etc. And we were pretty confident at that point that we had something quite interesting. So an example where we started and was a company called Earth Power in Australia. And the reason for that was one of our first supply points for bags was through our Australian distributor into the hospital and medical sector, in actual fact. And he was simply asked a question by Earth Power to say, could they use our material as a solution for their bags for collection of food waste that would then be placed directly into an AD unit. So we supplied some material. We checked the material that was originally used in the hospital situation was not exactly the quite same formulations we wanted to do on the AD from the work that we'd undertaken on the tests. So we gave them the material, got it converted through one of our Southeast Asian film and bag converters, and provided that into Australia. And they did their initial tests, and to be honest, in typical Australian fashion, it was fairly robust. And they decided to trap some material, as you can see there, bagged up, and leave it for 2, 3, 4 days in some cases to see whether the material would be resistant and would it break down in that instance. They moved it around mechanically into their operation. And in this particular case, they have a pre-AD unit, a hydrolytic unit, which is where all their material goes in. And obviously, they are aiming to macerate the food waste and also clean and remove any excess packaging material that obviously clearly won't go through an AD system. The advantage they found here was that they're generally aiming at sort of commercial waste. So there was a less contamination perhaps than there is in post-consumer. But the advantage they found was that as they macerated the food waste through their system, our bag material started to actually dissolve. This is a soluble material. It's a controllably soluble material. That's one of its advantages in this application. So in this particular instance, they had their pre-hydrolytic unit had a warm water, hot water system that dissolved the material and took the food waste, of course, with it. So they took the whole macerated unit, including the semi-dissolved or starting to break down hydropol, into their AD unit, processed it through their normal process and their normal dwell times, and then looked at the output. And there were no, it completely went through an AD unit without a problem. There were no residues left over, no microplastics left in the digestate at all, and a very efficient way of doing it. So they since have scaled up that operation to start to actually move commercial material through their system. And it also created an interest with another company in Australia that started to use the products and test the products the same way. I think their AD unit is slightly different, but we're waiting for details on that. That trial is ongoing, but at the moment it looks very promising. This brought us to the possibility, obviously, to bring it over to the UK, having had this positive result, which we've done. What we've done is through Thomas Minter at Malaby has done an awful lot of work with us on this to prove the efficacy of this material. He's also actually looking at systems to improve the throughput of the in-feed of the anaerobic feed by using water as an aid to process his food waste and start the breakdown of the hydropol materials as well as obviously aiding to remove his normal packaging waste that you have to remove anyway as a contamination. And again, that's gone through the AD unit and without an issue. So whilst we fully understand the complexities involved and are getting further to understand these complexities as we work with more partners, and more are certainly welcome in this area, in terms of the collection and the depackaging that's required at this front end, we do think this is an advantageous material to start reducing the complexity of that front end waste collection and therefore increase the efficiency of the throughput through into the AD unit and aid the whole AD process generally in terms of giving you a product that will break down in that system absolutely without a problem improve the quality of your digestate, so you reduce any plastic levels and hopefully down to zero ultimately, but certainly, you know, as a contributing factor and an efficiency factor, I think we're in play here. And I've just thrown that slide up because we've got a bit of a roundtable session tomorrow to cover more of this, and we can share some videos and so forth as well as we go forward. So hopefully we'll welcome some of you to that. But that's a sort of a brief intro to what we've been doing. So I hope that creates some level of interest. And as I say, any of you want to get involved in these tests and these projects, please contact us. Very welcome to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Really, really interesting stuff. So if you stop sharing your screen now, and I'd like to invite Sarah Karkadelis, who is a postgraduate researcher at Imperial College London.
I'll just share my slide.
That's great.
Hopefully you can all see this. Thank you, Leanne, for the introduction, and thanks, John. Really promising polymer. That ties in quite well with my presentation, and hopefully spark debate as well, because I'll be probably taking a bit of a counterpoint while still echoing some of the opportunities that exist in the system. So I'll start with saying that the material flow in the food supply chain is still overwhelmingly linear. When we look at global food production, about 1/3 of that is lost across stages of the food supply chain. And when we look at food waste in particular, about 3.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year are emitted. So it's quite significant, and food waste itself is a big stream, a waste stream. So about, depending on which reports you read, about 34 to 53% of municipal solid waste is made of food waste. And at the moment, most of that goes into either landfill or incineration. So really a linear model and a lack of innovation in a way in the system. So the incoming policy mandating separate food waste collections around from 2023 onwards, both in the UK and in the EU, really represents a huge opportunity for the AG system to capitalize on that waste material and capture and treat food waste. Oh, actually, sorry, I realized that's there. However, when we think of food waste, we often think of a sort of clean organic stream. The reality is somewhat more complex, unfortunately, and I think it highlights the complexities of modern food supply chains. So we end up with a material mixture, more the like of the bottom picture. So contamination is a big issue, and about 60% of that contamination stems from plastic materials. So when we look at alternatives and tackling this issue and moving towards biodegradable plastics, we really mean biodegradable plastic packaging. And so the use of biodegradable plastic packaging offers the opportunity to embed, to bring circular economy principles in the supply chain, and particularly for household waste. So when we move towards digestible packaging, so materials that are compatible with anaerobic digestion, there are a range of advantages. And here's a few that I mentioned. So the first one, sort of psychological or behavioral, from a behavioral perspective. So these plastics help overcome the so-called yuck factor. So evidence has shown that actually providing households with, for example, compostable caddy liners increases the uptake of food waste collection schemes. From a technological point of view, they help address hard-to-recycle plastics. So when we think of multi-layers and flexible packaging, replacing these with biodegradable plastics. And so these 2 points help for the collection in terms of increasing the capture of food waste, but also ensuring a cleaner feedstock stream. And that ties in with the final point, which was discussed in yesterday's session on digestate and microplastics. So, of course, the fewer plastics go in at the front end, the fewer plastics we get at the back end. So all these advantages can be harnessed through biodegradable packaging. Now here's my word of caution. When we think of biodegradable plastics, it's an extremely complicated sphere, and actually the terminology around biodegradable plastics is extremely leaky. So here's a range of terms that we associate when we think of bioplastics, biodegradable plastics. And the issue here is that the term biodegradable by itself doesn't mean much, and it's only unambiguous if both the environment in which it degrades and the time frame in which it degrades are specified. And I've highlighted here industrially compostable plastics because these, at the moment, these are the ones that we're working with, and that we refer to as biodegradable plastics. So these compostable, industrially compostable plastics, their compostability is backed up with accredited certification schemes. So here are 3 of the logos that we use in the EU and in the UK for certified compostables. Now I must say that at the moment there's no industry standard for a adheable or digestible plastic, and that's not to say that industrially compostable plastics or other materials won't biodegrade, and I think John has shown that, and that there's definitely interest in that field, but as a whole it's quite difficult to get a consensus. And so for that reason we're interested to look at the waste food waste AD industry in the UK and understand what the stakeholders' view were on using biodegradable plastics and treating those in AD. So we conducted a series of interviews with a range of stakeholders, representatives of the food and packaging supply chain, the AD industry, civil servants, environmental NGOs, etc. And what we found is that actually stakeholders the views are very conflicted, and you can see here, based on the coding references, positive and negative feelings around biodegradable plastics in AD. Roughly about half of the comments were positive and half of them were negative. And so then we moved into more in-depth analysis, so I won't cover everything, but essentially categorizing based on thematic nodes. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to highlight 3 of these issues that we've identified. So the first one being a systematic depackaging at the pre-treatment stage. So currently in the UK, most AD facilities treating food waste have a depackager at the front end that gets rid of any material that isn't food waste. What this means that is, regardless of whether or not your material is biodegradable, it will get removed, which partly defeats the point of having and developing biodegradable materials in the first place. And this is mostly due to concerns over biodegradability. As I've just mentioned, the lack of adheable standard makes a lot of Plan D operators reluctant to accept these materials because there's nothing for them to act as a guarantee that the material will go through their process without causing any harm to the system or to the digestate. And finally, another point that emerged from our analysis, and that ties in quite well with policy, is the need for a focus shift from methane yield to digestate quality. What this means is that instead of looking at AD merely as a renewable energy technology, really looking at it as a waste treatment strategy embedded within a circular economy. And I think this conference really highlights that as well. So obviously we're on the academic side of things, so we're interested to see also, okay, plant operators seem concerned, but what about the scientific evidence behind it? And actually there's a growing body of scientific literature to support effective biodegradation in lab conditions. And I used here lab conditions on purpose, because that's really key, and that is an issue that we've identified, and I think just generally applicable to academia, that there is a lack of translatability in studies on food waste, AD, and bioplastics in general. So it's really important that we try as a scientific community to develop research that is more aligned with current AD practices and needs of the industry. And this is something that we've highlighted in a recent perspective piece that is just going through a revision at the moment, where we've highlighted some of what we call hotspots for change. So identifying some of the processes in the system that need further research, but also better alignment with the current, the way the industry is currently operating. And one key hotspot for change that we looked at in particular is around microbial communities. So the AD system arguably is arguably still poorly characterized in terms of how introducing new novel materials such as biodegradable plastics impacts the community, the microbial communities that are actually responsible for methane production and for digesting these materials. And this is exactly what we're looking at now. So aiming to address this sort of black box in AD through metagenomic sequencing. So if you're not familiar with biological concepts, essentially what we're trying to do here is identify the microbial, certain microbial species that might be better at degrading a range of biodegradable polymers, and ultimately also providing plants with sort of microbial seeding possibilities to optimize the process and increase the biodegradation of biodegradable plastics. And I should mention here also that we welcome collaborations at this stage. So if you have, if you're AD operators and you have reactor data that you're willing to share, particularly around microbial profiling, and especially if you are actually processing these materials in your plant. I know a few companies do that in the UK. Please do reach out to us, and that's something that we'll be working on in the next couple of months. So just before moving on to the conclusions, I just wanted to emphasize as well the need for wider picture. And again, I think this is the right environment to do so. But essentially, that technology and technological innovation are only really part of the solution. And especially when we look at household waste and food waste stemming from both household and commercial activities, consumer awareness is still poor, but research has recently shown that the public does favor biodegradability, and that's really something that the AD sector should capitalize on. But we must ensure that clearer and also simpler labeling is provided for consumers. And finally, it's also important to work across different spheres, so across society, to ensure that the digester that comes out at the back end is both viable and sustainable for the industry. So to finish off, hopefully I wasn't too critical, and biodegradable plastics really do offer the opportunity to enhance the capture of food waste. However, yes, beware of the pitfalls and the leaky terminology around biodegradable plastics and a lot of greenwashing in that area. I briefly mentioned that biodegradable packaging only makes sense if treated accordingly. So it's important to support and develop the AD industry alongside biodegradable packaging, and not just making false claims about biodegradable packaging when nothing is really there to treat them. In terms from an academic perspective, aligning research with the real life, as I call it, and finally looking at the microbial communities and how they are involved in the process. So some of the references that were part of this presentation, and I've just attached here as well a paper. So this is our latest paper that addresses the trade-offs that emerge when we shift from biodegradable to conventional packaging. So if you're interested in that, please have a read. It's open access. So thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sarah. John, if you want to turn on your video and your microphone, I've got a couple of questions that have come in. So the first one is, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty about whether compostable packaging is compatible with AD. How can this be resolved, particularly in advance of the 2023 food waste collection policy? I suppose if we go to Sarah, you first, and then John, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's exactly what I was trying to say. I think in terms of how do we ensure it, we just need a standard. And as I said, a lot of compostable materials actually do also perform well in AD. We just need a standard to certify that, because obviously without that, as I mentioned, the operators will be quite reluctant to accept those.
And then yourself, John.
Yeah, obviously this is a complex area. Prior to me joining Aquapack, I was involved in the bioplastics arena for quite a long time. And we did some screening work a while back now on some of the base materials. And Sarah's quite right, some of them are compatible in these circumstances. For example, PHA is the obvious example of something which is classically ADable as well as compostable. The problem is that the majority of the bioplastics that are currently on the market, which are based around polyesters and starches, aren't. They are not compliant, particularly mesophilic AD. They don't break down very well at all. So you have a constraint on that. So you inevitably have to have some sort of, as Sarah's alluded to, a method of identifying which ones will actually work, which ones don't, which is precisely why we've gone down the route of not only our own testing, but actually demonstrable case study.
Right. That's great, thank you. And then we have another one that says, can digestible plastics replicate all types of conventional plastics? For example, bags, containers, films, etc.
I take that?
Yeah, it's confusion.
I think, I mean, clearly, I think what I think we've got to bear in mind is that, one, on a commercial AD system, you have a designated dwell time. It has to go through in a certain time, simply from a commercial point of view to make the system, economic. Obviously, the thicker the material you use, the longer that dwell time is going to be to break it down, whatever that material is. It doesn't really matter. So there has to be perhaps some thought around the pre-processing of thicker items, for example, that would then enter an AD unit in conjunction with food waste, etc., to get that acceleration and that dwell time. Otherwise, I think you'll struggle to do that. In principle, can you design any of these products, in whatever form you like? Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, I don't know if you have anything more to add.
I think one point also that is worth considering is do we need to change every single plastic packaging into digestible packaging? And the answer is clearly not. So I think even though we can reproduce some of the materials, and it might be harder to digest some of them because of the thickness, then arguably the thicker, very thick packaging should rather be recycled or should be reused. So I think digestible and biodegradable plastics really have a role in more flexible applications, or where you find also thinner materials.
Thank you. That's a really interesting perspective, I think, that sometimes gets overlooked. That's everything from our panel, from our Q&A. So I don't know if there's any sort of closing remarks that anybody would like to add, or if not, I will go ahead and sort of end the session. But yeah, I just want to take the time to thank all the attendees who are here watching. We've got a full day tomorrow, so don't forget to go register for some more sessions, and there are some breakout sessions as well, so do make sure you go and take a look at those, and just go and explore the exhibitor list, as I've said earlier. And we also, on the exhibitors, the WBA is hosting a survey, so do have a look there. Hopefully the link should be posted soon in the chat. It'd be really great to get some input from people all over the world. Sorry, I've just had another comment saying that unless this product is subject to legislation, the take-up will be affected by the price. Can this compete? I don't know if that's that was, yeah, I think so.
Well, there's clearly an interest from the industry, so I think the price point must be attractive to them, otherwise they wouldn't be starting to take this up. So yeah, come and talk to us on that.
Yeah, go and find Aquapack there. So on that note, I'll end the session, and yeah, thank you to everybody that's joined us. See you tomorrow. And